Welcome to Modern Aikidoist Podcast. Today I'm having an interview with Matt Stait, who contacted me directly via Facebook, and he's got a very interesting background. He's got a background not only in sport martial arts, but in traditional martial arts and reality-based martial arts. Kind of a list almost too long for me to go into here, but we're going to have a little discussion today about how we train and about innovating our art to make it practical for real-world application. And I'm very excited to talk to Matt, and I want to thank him for contacting me, and I'll kind of let him introduce himself. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, hi Tristan. Thanks for having me on. Just to clarify, my name is actually Stait, S-T-A-I-T.
Oh, my apologies.
No, it's okay. It's quite an unusual name, so you're not the first person to sort of mispronounce it. It's not very common at all, not even over here. So yeah, basically, long story short, obviously I've been doing martial arts a long time, and I've done lots of different types of martial arts, and I'm a big lover of martial arts as a whole and all the different types of it. And that then leads me to basically question, to weigh things up, to put things up against one another, and just essentially to find the core truths within all the different arts and the principles behind the things that we do. So all arts, I tend to feel, have they have principles that are universal, and that's kind of what has led me to our conversation today, really.
Fantastic. You know, I totally agree about the fundamental principles and the what I noticed in my martial journey, because I came from a sport fighting background, is that the closer you get to those true fundamentals, the better chance of success that you have, and the farther you get away from them, the more difficult it becomes to achieve success. And it's that discipline that I look at with martial arts, and really it's the same with anything, with music or with cooking or with, you know, any art or pursuit, is if you stick to the fundamentals of how it functions and how it works, that's where you will find success.
Absolutely, yeah, couldn't agree more. And that was sort of how we ended up here, because I have a colleague and a friend here in the UK called Martin Williams, who very much follows an Aikido path, which I must say now I actually don't. Although I come from a traditional Japanese sort of background, that was more karate based and jiu-jitsu based. So Martin Williams, he actually we've been in contact a number of times, and we've discussed ideas and thrown a few things back and forwards. He's a really interesting and knowledgeable guy in his own right. So and then he sort of brought to my attention a couple of the videos that you guys had done, and we just started chatting about that. And obviously, as I mentioned, I do like to ask questions and find things out. So I figured I would try and touch base with you, which has led us to this now.
Sure, and that's great. And I think that the videos that you're talking about are the Corky and Lenny meetup in Chicago, and perhaps some other ones too. I think you said you got a little familiar with some of the material that we had been posting up. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I'm always interested in other ways of doing things, and I was aware of Lenny with the Rogue Warriors kind of thing a little bit from previously, and I'd seen a few of his videos, and then but it was that one specifically that was brought to my attention, because a few people were obviously discussing it, as a lot of people are, and they just were curious as to my thoughts on how I felt about it, which obviously from a non-Aikido background it's kind of interesting, as I'm not looking at it with any particular bias or any kind of I'm not in any camp, if that makes sense.
Sure, yeah, and I think listeners here would be interested in hearing your perspectives on that too. I always love hearing people come at it from a different background, especially with your bouncing and security background, your real world practical experience and what you saw with what was presented there. So feel free to share your insights.
Well, I don't want to be judgmental on anything, firstly, and secondly, I always say to people straight away that just because I can't do something doesn't mean it can't be done, and I think that's a very good place to start any conversation from, rather than just dismissing things out of hand.
Very well said. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. There's things that there are things in this world that I just can't sort of explain or or fully know about, and that's the way that it should be. So with that in mind, it's, looking at it, for me, it was a case of I was trying to assimilate the different points of view, because they were quite surprising to me, was that the points of view were so very much apart from one another, yet it was still essentially the same system that you guys were talking about. So that was the first really interesting point, was the fact that you could be looking at the same sort of subject and professing to train the same system, but they were two very, very different variations of the same.
Right. Yep. And that's part of what made that meetup such an interesting prospect, is to hear such divergent opinions about, the scene, like you said, the same thing or the same art. But do carry on.
Yeah. So, obviously, anybody doing that firstly deserves kudos and praise. One of the things we do have to be careful about is that it doesn't turn into a sort of slander match on any level in any situation like that, because it is an exchange of knowledge, and we don't always have to agree. I think the modern world sometimes is a bit crazy like that, isn't it? Where if we disagree on even the slightest point, then we can't be friends, which is ludicrous.
Exactly.
I think it's actually far more healthy to say, well, let's critically analyze that particular thing and then decide from the facts that come forward as to whether or not that's relevant to myself and my training. Because again, there's lots of different reasons for training. For myself, as mentioned, with regards to doing the security work, working as a bouncer and a bodyguard and all that kind of stuff, then it was very necessary for me to have skills that were workable, applicable, and could be relied upon. So for me, that it was different. I wasn't necessarily seeking a long-standing study of knowledge, and so the concept is different as to what you're training for, isn't it? And I think that has to be addressed straight away, in the sense that not everybody wants the same thing from their training. So just because something isn't what people would class as reality-based, that doesn't mean it has any less validity than something else.
Sure. Yeah, and validity to a given application. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's knowing what it's for, isn't it? That's the thing. It is, obviously, we don't want to get too far into the realms of, well, if somebody is claiming something is sort of self-defense and is going to save them in a real situation, then that's a slightly different premise to somebody learning techniques and systems for historical value or for educational value. They are different things, and as long as everybody sort of understands that, then I don't think there has to be a problem. That's my opinion.
Well, yeah, and I agree with that estimation, and I think really there is a palpable frustration I know at least in the Aikido world, but I think in the martial arts world in general, and that comes from when students expect that they are being taught practical self-defense, and maybe because their instructors or their dojo tells them that this is what you will get when you train here or train with me, only to find out that what they're really delivered is something that is not practical, but is kind of its own thing. And you could make that estimation of, like Tai Chi, for example, which I respect a great deal. When you see people who are older who are using Tai Chi to get standing up and get moving and to kind of get their bodies flexible and moving around, that's really great if that's what the purpose is. But for those people that would study an art like that, and I think Aikido is kind of has split off into two severe different camps, where a great deal of it is very much like Tai Chi. It's a movement exercise, it's a moving meditation, it's a spiritual development practice, and that's all great. But the ethical paradox there is the people that are being told that is practical for self-defense. And what happens is eventually a crisis of faith happens, where they either one day realize, listen, I don't understand how this relates to self-defense. And being told that it doesn't reassure them. And it certainly, when they get attacked, won't reassure them very well either. And
No.
And the response can be pretty drastic, and I think that can give people who preach that a bad name, and it can give the art a bad name.
Absolutely.
And there's nothing wrong with the pursuit of that if it's openly admitted that that is exactly what it is. And if you're looking for self-defense, if you're looking for something that's practical like you do on the job, then that type of practice is just not gonna be the right fit. And I kind of wish if I had my mother of all wishes for the Aikido world is that we could have a term or a way of referring to that type of a practice, the meditative, spiritual, connection-based, low-level sort of movement theoretical study that had its own term, so that it wouldn't be confused with the martial art of Aikido, and it would just bring more clarity. I think people could understand better. For example, in Chinese martial arts, there's a difference between Tai Chi and Kung Fu. And everybody knows it. Everybody understands those differences. And you can get into the weeds with Tai Chi because there are competitive versions of Tai Chi that are very physical. It's not what most people picture of, a bunch of older people in the park all moving together, very slowly. That's not all of what Tai Chi is. But by and large, they understand that there's an internal study practice of Chinese martial arts, and there's an expressive physical aspect of Chinese martial arts, and Aikido unfortunately doesn't have that. It's all lumped into one big ball.
Well, entirely right. Yeah, I mean there are arts across the world that are seen as a holistic practice as opposed to a martial art, although they still fall under that umbrella and they do have martial applications to them.
Sure.
So I totally agree with that. I mean, I think one of the thing is I'm sort of known for reality kind of stuff. I'm not sure I like the term because I am a martial artist and I love martial arts in all its guises. But I'm more known for, if you like, the outside world application of such. So
sure. The practical study.
So what I tend to find is that when I'm talking about this, I do occasionally rattle some cages because I'm quite open and honest about it. And the reason for that is that over the 35 plus years that I've been training, I've made quite a few wrong turns. I've hit a few walls, I've hit a few dead ends, and I'd rather people didn't necessarily have to make the same mistakes over and over again to achieve the same sort of outcome. So,
sure.
What I tend to do is I look at it like, I explain it like I would if I was talking about taking your child to a swimming lesson, and then it shows the ludicrousy of what is modern martial arts sometimes. And so if you imagine you've got little Johnny and you've gone to your local swimming pool and you're being introduced to the swimming instructor, the person that's going to train little Johnny how to swim, and the instructor says, "Hi, my name is such and such and I'm going to teach you how to swim. Now the first thing you need to do is stand here on the side. We're not actually going to get in the water, we're going to stand here on the side and we're going to imitate what swimming is." And then he goes on to say, "I've never actually swam myself. I've never actually been in the pool. However, I was told by somebody that this is how you swim. And what's even more important is that anybody that swims differently is wrong."
Yeah.
And then when you look at it like that, it just sounds incredibly absurd. And that sometimes is how the martial arts world can appear. Not, I mean, there's a lot of really good open-minded people out there, sure. But there are occasionally some people that are sort of invested in a system, and so they would much rather make violence fit their system than make the system fit violence, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And there's a lot of work moving the mountain to Muhammad, trying to make reality come to you, rather than you taking steps to get towards reality. And I love your swimming analogy. In fact, I've used something very similar to that. And I'll only add one thing, and that is, what if Johnny says, "Well, hey, can I jump in the water and test this out?" "Oh, no. You don't want to do that. That would just not, yes. You don't understand yet. You don't comprehend all of the intricacies of how you need to wave your arms and legs about."
Quite.
And that's kind of the feel that I get from a lot of the academic martial artists, who not only compound the problem with their lack of experience and practical teaching, and I think there's a certain aspect there. For example, let's say you have a broken leg and you want to go to a surgeon to have it reset and have the work done. And you ask the surgeon, have you ever had a broken leg? Well, no, you don't necessarily need a surgeon to cure your cancer that has had cancer himself. What you need is to learn from somebody who has had the experience of doing exactly what you're doing. Because a lot of people will jump into the kind of the binary argument. Okay, well, yeah, I'm in a dojo a lot, but what do I got to go out and pick bar fights and street fights to get experience? Do I have to go and sign up to a job to be a bouncer to get real world experience? And I don't think that's obviously that's a bit of an absurd jump to have to make, to go turn yourself into the very monster that you're trying to train yourself to protect yourself from. However, your training does need to get as close as possible to reality. And as I guide students through that, you do it in stages. You don't just throw that kid in the deep end of the pool and say, go ahead, there it is, there's your water, swim or drown, we'll see. You guide them through, you like a swimming instructor would train, give them what they need to get to the next level from wherever they're at. And as time goes on, they improve and they get closer and closer and closer to, the realities and in this case, with martial arts, of dealing with a real attacker, dealing with violence, to have the confidence, the skills, the body movements, the correct responses, all that are needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
but do it in a safe way. You don't want to have them go home with black eyes and chipped teeth every day, and be so injured they either don't want to come back or can't come back because they're banged up and they're, that's not practical either. So.
No, of course, that's not viable for anyone, is it? It's
right.
But that's one of the reasons why we sort of ended up having a conversation in the first place, because what I didn't want to do and what I don't want other people to do, because it's an easy assumption to make, is just to dismiss Aikido as a whole. And I, as I say, for me, talking with Martin and some other people in some of the groups over here, some of the guys are actively trying to, understand how to apply what they know in a more viable way. Right. And I'm wholly supportive of that. And so rather than dismiss everything as a whole, the conversation should really be, well, okay, what have we, let's take what we've learned from this so far and then try and figure out ways to improve what we're doing, rather than just continually sort of come back to the same secular sort of arguments, because that doesn't actually help anyone, does it? And I don't think. And so I would actually be asking at this point that my takeaway from that video would actually be, how can we look to improve what we do in such a way that everybody can benefit from it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up kind of the hair splitting or the nitpicking aspect, because at least what I've noticed is you get martial artists together and they will get deep into the weeds about, well, no, you don't put your arm here and you don't put your arm there, to make something work. Now, from my background, my competitive background, what I know is that you can screw up and still find success and still succeed. You just have to screw up less than the other guy does. So the idea that your martial art, or anybody's martial art, and I think all of us have been guilty of this at some point or other, is to say, okay, what is that ivory tower perfection of a technique that is flawless, and then everything else is garbage, and they start arguing about one person's ivory tower perfection versus another person's ivory tower perfection. They get lost in the idea of, well, did it work? Did the technique or what you did perform the function adequately, and do you feel like it was a high percentage, like this is something you could get replicatable results with on a regular basis? And I like the term that you used before of, from the practical standpoint, is this something that you can trust? Did you, is it a technique that will perform when you need it to, without having to worry about it being fussy or tricky or, easily failed?
Yeah, totally. But I think, again, I think what's interesting about these particular types of conversations is you find that people that have, for want of a better description, cross-trained in other things, or had a professional life that involved being in and around confrontational situations, those people tend to be a little more open to suggestion that, being half-inch out or being slightly wrong on the angle actually doesn't matter that much. And sometimes it's necessary to do that to actually make that technique work against somebody who's behaving and acting in a completely different way to your prescribed key dojo.
Yep, your audio is breaking up just a little bit, but I'm not sure if there's anything you can do about it. And I will echo that too. Is and this is something I've definitely experienced from my sport background, but I've also heard from people like you in the field that have been in security work, dealt with, drunks, aggressive people, gang members, real fights. Is they'll often come away and say, "Wow, that was ugly. It didn't go the way I wanted it to go, and I didn't perform as well as I know I could have, but it worked. I did the job I needed to do it in that moment, and I made it succeed." And so I think that's a valuable insight and perspective from a practical application standpoint. You're in the moment, you got to make it work. And it doesn't matter how pretty it is or how technically precise you get it, as long as it functions, as long as it gets the job that it needs to get done.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we spoke a little bit previously. We talked about the what's our reason for training, if you like. Are we training a historical art for the sake of understanding the history of something and for the art of the martial, or are we training for the modern day enemy, whomever that might be? And when we're discussing moving forwards what's applicable to the modern age, we have to modify what we do. We have to modify the training. I mean, that's just common sense, because the world is different now. We talk about sort of social media, we talk about technology, we talk about cameras being everywhere. In fact, a very good point was raised to me yesterday regarding that. If you go back 20 years, we didn't have to worry about being constantly under surveillance through CCTV, especially in the UK. It's like one of the worst in the world, apparently, for that. But everybody's got a camera on their phone now, and instantly, the moment there's any sort of sniff of anything, people are whipping out their phones and they're filming it. So you're live on social media before you've even thrown a punch.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's a very real part of the modern day dynamic when it comes to self-defense, combatives, martial arts, but it's still really not addressed by a lot of people who are sort of suggesting that they are teaching a fully rounded self-defense system.
Yeah, and that statement you made about the world being different now is definitely profound. And what struck me as you talked about that, as I thought of it, was violence isn't any different than it has been for thousands of years. What has changed is the fact that many people are watching movie and TV violence and seeing that as reality, and it's not. They have gotten to a point where they are being taught small components or isolated parts that have been diluted over years of isolated dojo training that have drifted away from reality. And so their perception of what they're shown or what they're taught or what they see in a movie or TV, and they think that that's violence, is a separation from what violence and combat has been between human beings for thousands of years. And maybe that's a way that it's different now with a modern perception. And that's causing the problem of the misunderstanding between, okay, what do you need to really protect yourself against in the real violence versus I want to look like a superhero in a movie or TV show, or a good guy that's beating up the bad guys and handling them very easily. That's a distortion I've run into a number of times, where as people, the brain has trouble discerning reality from fiction when it sees with its own eyes something that looks plausible, like a movie fight scene.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if your only point of reference is the Indiana Jones movies, you're going to be in for a bit of a shock. That's for sure and certain. And again, one of the things that really comes to the fore when I'm delivering this, because I do quite a few seminars around, I teach a lot of security people, so on and so forth. So, I actually have to talk to a lot of people that are actually involved with violence on a regular basis, so whether that be hospital staff or, as I say, security staff or mental health workers, things like that. But they're confronted with the reality of often, and they are very, very, very aware of what's real and what's not. And that's a completely different dynamic than when I'm teaching a martial arts group. I did one the other day, and it was quite interesting because I opened the seminar with, put your hand up if you've ever had a real fight. Now, bear in mind, I'm in a room full of black belts and reasonably high grade martial artists, and it was less than 50% of them actually put their hand up and said they'd actually had a real fight. Yes, yet all these guys are considered experts. I'm doing the air quotes at this point.
Right. Yeah.
But all these guys are considered experts at physical violence, which is sort of ludicrous beyond measure, that how we've sort of ended up in this particular way in this day and age. Because it's very, very odd to me that there are people out there that have never had a fight in their lives, but are yet teaching people and being listened to and paid lots of money to in some instances to deliver training on that very subject. It does strike me as peculiar.
It is, and it's a great point, because I think it's not just Aikido that suffers from this. Many martial arts have this same experience, and I think a lot of people in martial arts world who are scratching their heads going, again, like, God, do I need to go out to get into fights so that I can raise my hand at the next seminar and say I've been in a real fight? And I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I think that taking responsibility for your own experience is definitely top of the list, and to get with people who have been there and learn directly from them, and get them to walk you towards the reality part. And I think if there was one blessing about the internet, is that this open and free communication that we have now allows much greater access than ever before to doing what you and I are doing right now, which is sharing insight together from different worlds so that we can learn from each other without having to go start picking fights or get into fights so that you can test your art out. And, I remember reading that Gozo Shiota, who was a student of O-sensei's, he would do that. He would do exactly that. He wanted to test his Aikido out. And so after class in the evenings, he would go out to the rougher parts of town and see how his Aikido worked. And, I think that's pretty extreme. And I think within the lens of modern ethics and morality, people would rightfully view that as rather inappropriate, or at least that they would not want to do the same things themselves. And I certainly wouldn't advocate for it. But that doesn't mean that we can't learn from each other, improve the methods of how we train so we can get closer to reality, as close as possible, without beating the ever-loving crap out of each other and getting hurt. And other arts do high-intensity training as part of their process to get that what is greatly called stress inoculation. Get to the point where you can be in a high-stress situation without having it run away with you. So you maintain control. You know what to do. You have the right stuff programmed into you, movements, positions, the goals you're trying to achieve and how to achieve them. That can be had without having to put yourself into a Conan pit, on a weekly basis. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, totally. Oh, absolutely, totally. Yes. I mean, there's. I would suggest it's morally bankrupt to go out and actually sort of pick fights with people and look to cause people harm just to see what you know. I mean, that's not a sensible thing to suggest at all, and I certainly wouldn't advocate that. But it's sort of interesting because, as you know, I've written a couple of books, and the first book I wrote was my time with security, and during that I actually explained why I took that road, which was to try and test what I thought I knew. And it's one of those where I found how could I test what I thought I knew, but do it in a way that was acceptable to me and my morality, and that's what I came up with. Actually, I'm being paid to police people and to look after people's safety, and that was for me that was a good way to explore and experience that, and it opened up an awful lot of questions to me, but it also answered a lot of questions as well. But then the second book that I wrote about was about my time through the martial arts, and again, it's what's telling through that is, as an example, I'd been doing karate for a large number of years with a reasonable amount of success with regards to competition and all the rest of it. And I joined a wrestling club, and my goodness me, I was totally schooled
Wrestling will humble you so fast. It's amazing.
Totally, yeah. And it was, and then I moved on to something else, and the same applied. And it was every time that you step out of your, if you like, comfort zone into something new. It doesn't have to be, bare knuckle, let's up to the death knot, so to speak. It just, you can step outside of your, if you like, your comfort zone, just move into different discipline for a try, just to see how it weighs up, just to see how you weigh up, and that in it often can really help with everybody's individual training. I think that's probably one of the keys. To be honest, I would say that it's a very difficult thing for people that are traditionalists, because they do like to stay in what they do and only stay within that. But I would always say to people, just try a few other things, just to get a feel for it and see where you are in the world. It's very beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I having done the cross training part, one of the things I thought about doing for this podcast was an episode on practical ideas for how to cross train without just having to go walk into some other dojo or a boxing gym or wrestling gym and say, all right, sign me up. I'm going to start from 0 on all the way up, and have to go through the same grind that they did with their base art. Because that's pretty daunting, especially as you get older. Like, oh my God, I've got to go through 4 or 5 years worth of absolutely getting schooled and feeling humiliated. Well, that's not necessarily, it's not absolutely needed to do that way. I think building friendships and collaborating with people who can give you insights, people who are well-trained martial artists can learn pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
It's not like you're starting from absolute square one, although you are drifting off into a new realm. And the idea of, kind of like your swimming analogy, taking that young boy swimmer and saying, okay, guess what? We're going to fly over choppy seas, and I'm going to drop you into the most tumultuous ocean I can find, and that's where you're going to learn to swim. That would be like getting into a real fight. So, and that which would be absurd. That would be murder. I mean, no doubt about it. But I've found great value in finding people with wrestling experience, real fighting experience, and saying, hey, let's get together. Let's work a little bit. I want you to share some insights. Let me show you where I'm at, and have you constructively help me adopt other things and other experiences. In fact, I wanted you to share a little of that story that you told me yesterday of the woman you worked with and gave her some insights. You remember that story?
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's a sort of an ongoing thing that I like to try and do for people is I don't say to people you have to change your style, or you have to change your system, or you have to do something completely different. What I try and do is I just try and say, well, in an outside environment, if you go about applying this in a slightly different way, you may have a bit more success with it. So it's just basically working on the platform more than anything else. And I had a lady that I'm doing a little bit with who's had a pretty extensive Aikido background. She does hold a black belt. She has trained in Japan for a number of years. She's also done a few years of traditional karate. And we were just looking at some basic wrist locking techniques. And I just showed her a few little ways that I would apply that. And again, bear in mind, I've done over 25 years looking the doors, making these things work on big, powerful, sometimes drugged up, very aggressive people. So, I've had the squirmers, the strikers, the runners away, just about all of the different ways of dealing with that. So I learned to contain that energy as small as I can make it. So rather than, if you think, big circles, big deflections of energy, all I'm really doing is just tightening that up as far as I possibly can, so there's less risk of A, me getting it wrong, and B, they're able to move out of the technique. And so I showed her that quite quickly, and she responded with that she'd actually learned more with regards to that particular technique in the 5 minutes that we've been working together than she had in the past 17 years. Now, that's certainly not to dismiss any of her previous training, because that's not what it's for. But when it said that it's really odd that she couldn't get that to work on me, but it had worked on every single person who'd ever done it with in her dojo, I think that remark was incredibly telling.
It is, and I the feel that I've gotten from people that are used to their dojo, they're used to the patterns that they've learned, and working, lightly with each other, I think they find the idea of straying off that path into reality like utterly terrifying, thinking that, oh my God, this is going to be brutal, it's going to be rough, it's going to be violent. And my own experience in bringing that to my students is that if you can explain it and show it and teach it in a clear way and get them to the point where they can feel it and understand it in a way that doesn't threaten their safety, but yet they can feel the power, they can, as you start to graduate, they start getting it down, you graduate up the level of intensity, but they're still able to deal with it effectively. It's very enjoyable. It is a really empowering process, and it's fun to leave a class going, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know how practical and applicable this is, and that it's not hard to do. It's not overly complex. It's not overly complicated. To me, that is what a good teacher gives their student and imparts on somebody. Have them leave feeling empowered, like they're capable where they didn't think they were before.
No, totally agree with everything that you're saying. I mean, that's one of the great things about this is that, we may come from different backgrounds and from different sort of continents, but we can still have this conversation and speak the same language. I think it's really important that people do understand the premise of this is you don't have to throw yourselves to the wolves. You don't have to go through the grinder again, especially for people that are a little bit older in life and don't necessarily need to go through it. That it's not necessary. And so there's the problems are twofold, which is number one, we all want to be the hero in our story, and that is a bit of an issue when it comes to training, because we always train to succeed, and what we need to focus on is train to failure, and that's a completely different dynamic. Because if you say, for example, if you take a set piece that people do, whatever style that is, quite often they've got set pieces. And so they do two-step sparring, whatever you call it, and they've got a prescribed response to an action. Now, if you just take that and put it in a slightly different format, so basically what I mean by that is I'm not going to tell you I'm going to punch with a lead, stepping through lead hand punch, and I'm going to overextend on purpose. Instead of doing that, what I'm actually going to do is put a pair of gloves on, not full intent, but I'm just going to throw a couple of different angle shots and see how you cater to that. And that obviously changes the dynamic greatly. It's an easy fix. It's a very quick thing to do. Something as simple as taking yourselves onto a different ground, whether that be gravel or grass, wearing different clothing. Some things as simple as just changing the dynamics on those levels can be the first steps towards a better understanding of what it is that you do. And it's a very easy fix, I find, a lot of the time, because when I go into clubs, when I'm talking to other instructors and we're discussing this, quite often what I'll say is, well, all we need to do is literally just modify one or two of your drills, just make them a bit more alive. And also what normally happens then as well is it starts to be great fun. And that's probably one of the best ways to learn anything, isn't it? Is to have fun with it. Yeah,
absolutely. And to me, even though Sensei said you have to practice Aikido with joy, and to me, that's he just used a different term as fun, but joy is fun to me. So
yes. Well,
the more fun you're having, the more you want to come back. Especially when you feel like, wow, I had it. Not only did I have a great time, but I feel like I know myself better. I know what I can do. I know that I'm not just going to be a speed bump to somebody who wants to push me around.
Absolutely. And more importantly, that when you get it wrong, it doesn't matter because you're enjoying it.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
So it's an interesting sort of concept, and it's a very fix, and it's what I think, for anybody that's sort of listening that's interested in having a go at that. I mean, you're quite welcome to have a look at my YouTube channel, see some of the videos that I do and some of the little drills that we do, and they're easily applicable across the board. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we started chatting, myself and Martin, was it was an exchange of some training ideas and things like that. And so people are more than welcome to sort of jump on my channel and have a look, or to contact me through Facebook. I'm quite happy to chat about it. It's as I said, the whole point of this is we're all learning all at the same time. I don't know some things about a lot of things, but I do know some things of some things, and hopefully we can share and exchange a bit of knowledge. We're all better for it.
Yeah, I totally agree. In fact, what I will do is I will put links in the show notes or the description area for your different sites, and people can contact you there. And I know that one of the things you mentioned to me about yesterday when we talked, which was the idea of collaborating together, actually working together, because if our goals are the same, is to share training ideas. And that's, as a teacher, that's the thing that fascinates me the most, is how can we train this? What new ideas for bringing in and letting students enjoy themselves, learn practical skills, have a good time, be able to be comfortable enough to start upping the intensity without hurting each other, do it safely, but they really get that enjoyment learning part. And so I guess from here, I want to officially invite you to be a collaborator with our new Shinjitsu Aikido Alliance, and help us, and we can work together, and we'll figure out exactly what that's going to look like. Or still kind of, with me being in the United States, you being in England, it's kind of makes it a little difficult. But we do have internet tools that can help us collaborate on with sharing videos, and even maybe doing a live thing. That's something I've not done yet, or figured out the technical issues with, but I think we can share some great ideas and help not just each other, but other people who are interested in the same thing.
Well, yes. First, let me say thank you very much for the invite and the opportunity. I would definitely sort of love to be involved, and it's also very beneficial for me, my end, because you guys are also incredibly knowledgeable, and I can learn an awful lot from you guys. So I think, as a knowledge exchange, as a hive mind, if you like, as an expert of martial arts, not just Aikido, it's a fantastic idea, and I'm more than happy to be on board. And with modern technology the way that it is, absolutely great, isn't it? We can like this, we've access to video lives and things. So being in a specific space isn't the future it used to be, is it?
Yeah, exactly. And we've got some great things that we can use. We'll figure out the best ways to do them. Of course, my wife is insistent that I fly over to England and take her with, so we can make a vacation out of it. She's like, 3 people over there now that really want to have you come and teach and train. So when are we going? When should I start packing? Which I would love nothing more than to come over there and visit all you guys and get on the mat, because the mat is where everything comes out. You get out into training, and it's great having discussions. I mean, I love discussions like this. I'm not really as fond of the bickering. Don't care for that much, but getting on the mat and getting hands-on, and that's where the art really improves. That's where we really improve, and where our friendships are built.
Totally. Again, I can't agree more. I mean, there's nothing. I think we've all seen it before, where we've gone to a seminar or an open training session and really know anybody in the room, and everybody's sort of looking at each other with those forward glances and a bit of chew. But when the training's done, everybody's slapping each other on the back and are great friends, and some of those friendships last a lifetime. And that shared experience training. That's what brings us all together, and that is. We should be focusing on far more than the differences. We should be focusing on the things that actually bring us together. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very excited about this, and I'm really looking forward to getting this podcast posted. So if there's anything else you wanted to add, feel free. But I think we're getting close to a wrap-up point here.
In fact, well, what I would actually say is I would be interested in asking some open questions, really, to aid the discussion, but also to try and find out what would be the most beneficial things for people to be looking at. So, firstly, as a non-Aikido practitioner, I do have to be clear about that, because I don't want people coming forward and saying, well, what does he know, because he doesn't practice that. I'm willing to concede that isn't my knowledge, expertise, and I'm also willing to suggest that's one of the reasons why I'm here, because I want to learn more about what it is you guys do, and I want to help promote the positive side of that instead of what a lot of people see, which at the moment can be seen as quite negative. There is quite a lot of negativity towards Aikido in the wider martial arts world that I would like to be part of the cure for want of a better word. So the question would be really sort of what sort of things would people find beneficial from my skill set? What could they want from me to sort of map over, and what sort of things would suggest that I would be better off looking at and learning from as a way to enhance my own understanding of what we're talking about?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I'd love to hear what people have to say, either in the comments on the YouTube page, or they can go to Aikido the Martial Side, post up comments. We'd love to hear what your answer to Matt's question is. And I would just like to point out too that if your first reaction is exactly what Matt said, is what does this guy know about? I will say as an Aikido guy, check your attitude, because that is exactly a negative attitude about, you know, trying to discount somebody who's not only got the skill and experience, but is eager and willing to share his knowledge and insights with people who are interested in it. So, coming from the Aikido world, I will say that there is some poor attitude out there, and I'm sad because of it. I've seen some of my fellow Aikidoka represent themselves very poorly, with a poor attitude. They want to be argumentative. They want to be dismissive. They come across as a bit elitist, and there's just not a place for that. There's no respectable martial artist that comes across with an attitude like that.
Well, I think being honest on that, again, trying to stay away from the negative. I think
Right.
a group like Posing will really only attract the people that are open-minded and want to learn, the people that are closed-minded and blinkered and you know and set in their ways to the point where they refuse to accept that the world moves. Then you know they're very quickly going to get bored of being in a space where everyone's trying to improve each other. So good luck to them in what they're doing. I wish them all the best, but I don't think I'll waste my time talking to them.
Exactly. You know, and I established the Aikido the Martial Side group about 2 years ago after a telesummit that was hosted by Miles Kessler, and there seemed to be quite a bit of interest in re-examining and kind of looking at Aikido's martial side and gathering together and building on that. And that's why I put the group together. And I've been very pleasantly surprised at how many people seem to be interested in doing that. And that there is such a good attitude, people being civil and sharing their ideas and their interest in having their Aikido be a potent, powerful martial art. And I believe that that's what O-sensei's art was. His primary students were very potent martial artists, primarily, I think, because they did a lot of cross-training, but the Aikido certainly was a factor of that. And that's what I would personally want my art to be. And I think there's a lot of people out there that are either definitely interested in that, or at least curious and would like to know more and would like to try it out. And those are the people that I think will benefit the most from this thing that we are trying to do here, which is to explore that more, get more resources and more insights for people to learn from, give them training ideas and share ways to improve themselves quickly, not take 10, 20 years to do it, but get them skills and have them be enjoying their training time and getting the most out of it. And so I find it's very exciting. I'm very passionate about it. And I've been lucky enough to run into other people like Lenny Sly, Francisco de los Cobos, and Martin Williams, Ian Wright over in England. A number of people all over the world, I think, are just as passionate as I am, if not even more, and about this. So I'm very excited about it. This is a really great thing. And I'm really glad that you contacted me, Matt. I really enjoyed our conversation yesterday, and this one's even better. So I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to working together.
Absolutely, me too, my friend. And as you say, it's people over here in the UK, Martin and Ian. I've spoken to both of those at length on these topics, and those are the kind of guys that are open-minded to have these conversations, and that's definitely how we want to be moving forward. And again, it's one of those where I think what you sort of put out to the world is sort of a lot of what you get back. So with regards to meeting all these great people, including yourself, I think a lot of that is because we are. You know, we're putting our out there and saying, look, we don't know everything. You know, you share what you know, we'll share what we know, and together we'll all be better for it. And I think if we're giving that energy out to the world, then it's hard not to be good people.
Exactly. You know, there's a phrase I heard that I just love, and it goes, if you're the smartest man in the room, you're in the wrong room. And
yeah, very true. Yeah.
And you know, I love being in a room where I can learn from so many other people, and honestly, somebody doesn't even have to be smarter than me for me to learn from them. So I learn from my students all the time. Everybody has their insights to offer. It's like, but get in that room, get in the room with people that have got what you want and steal it from them and make it your own. And so I'm really excited. Like I said, I wish I could get on a plane and get over there to you guys, because now I'm hopping to get on the mat.
Well, my friend, what we'll do is we will try and figure out some ways to connect using technology so that we can actually start implementing a few training ideas. I think, again, maybe that's a question for the wider world as to, what sort of suggestions would they have? I mean, would some striking drills be an idea? Would some defenses against some striking drills be an idea? So on and so forth. Just some sort of ideas to play with and come up with. I mean, have watched some of your weekend courses that you did over Lens. I mean, some of those ideas there, some of the things you were doing were actually, people would say burnt Aikido, but I would say they were definitely very functional skills that could lead into your, if you like, traditional Aikido. I mean, it's very difficult to throw something if you fall it away, isn't it? I mean,
Right.
Things like covering ground, things like getting into people, things like surviving the first punch. I mean, the amount of traditional systems I see that never ever practice a swinging barroom style punch defense because it's not in their system. And so, that sort of thing. It's like, well, to me, that's 101. You don't train the defenses of choice, you train the defenses that are likely to happen.
Exactly.
And so things like that as an example. I mean, I'd be really open to suggestions, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can put out of the mix and put together.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, and definitely for anybody listening, please post up if you have comments, things you'd like to see, whether they're holes of, like Matt was saying about attacks that you don't ever train against, like what are useful ways to start training them. These are some of the things that we're addressing in the initial set of videos that we're putting together for the Shinjitsu Aikido Alliance offering to try to work on, all right, how can we bring these useful practical things in to people very quickly. So this is just the beginning of the collaboration, Matt, and I'm looking forward to what we can do. And yeah, I guess that's what I've got for today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I think it's been again a great conversation, and I really enjoyed chatting with you. And more importantly, very excited about what the future is going to hold, because I'm suspecting that this is going to be a really worthwhile sort of collaboration of like-minded individuals, and I'm looking forward to meeting some of the other guys that will invariably end up getting involved because because it's such a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the risk of throwing out a corny movie quote, the future is what we make it. And so today we've started making it. Actually, we've started long before today, but we're starting to see it come together. So I'm very excited about that.
Me as well, my friend. Yeah, very much looking forward to it. So, well, I mean, for all the guys listening, it's been absolutely great sort of talking to you guys. And as I say, just leave us your questions, leave us your comments, leave us your suggestions, and we'll try and get something put together as soon as possible, really.
Sounds great, Matt. Okay, everybody, thank you for listening. As usual, please like and comment, subscribe to the channel. Again, post up your comments. We want to hear what you think would be useful or what you'd like to see, or if you've got ideas. Also, I could use some suggestions as the best way to do live video sharing and whatnot. I'm looking into it, but if you've got some tips or something you can throw my way to help illuminate that, the quicker we can kind of get things going. So thanks again, and enjoy your training.